Okay, so I'd like to call to order the Cumberland School Committee Budget Workshop at 6:01 p.m. on Monday, February 1st, 2021. In accordance with Governor Raimondo's Executive Order 21-01 dated January 6, 2021, the Cumberland School Committee intends to conduct this meeting remotely. The public can participate in this meeting remotely, but not in person, by calling 301-715-8592, webinar ID 956-6308-2084, or they can join via Zoom by going to the Cumberland Schools District website, to the events calendar, and clicking on the link. So the first item on the agenda is approval of agenda. Item A, compliance with Governor's Executive Order 21-01 dated January 6, 2021. Discussion or vote on whether there is public access to the meeting through adequate alternative means. Mr. Chairman. And it is. So I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Who was that?
Mr. DeMonica.
Mr. DeMonica, sorry. And a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Rogalski. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, 7-0. We essentially have one big topic on the agenda tonight, which is an overview of the Cumberland School Department budget process. And so I've met with Bob and Alex to talk about or try to identify what kinds of things the school committee, and especially the new members, should know and learn and understand about the budget process. The budget process is complex. It has a lot of different pieces to it, and it takes up a big part of our time together, as it should. And so it's important that we understand. So I want everyone tonight to, there are no stupid questions. I mean that. And if Alex needs to slow down, you tell him, ask him to slow down. If you have a question about a term or an acronym that might show up, please stop and ask. That is really why we're doing this, to help everyone and make sure everyone understands the pieces of it. And we also, shared this agenda with the town council. So I'm really pleased to see so many members of the town council on tonight. So, they can also hear what everyone else is hearing as we prepare for our first meeting next Monday. I'm also pleased to see some of the administrators and the president of the teachers union here. It's just really good for everyone to get a good sense of what makes up our budget, what makes up our expenditures, and what our challenges typically tend to be. So again, I mean it. There are no stupid questions. I mean, I've been on the school committee for 4 years now, and it's a lot to get your head around, for sure. And if after this, anyone wants to have a one-on-one with Alex or with anyone, you can certainly do that to even dive deeper into it, because it does take a while to try to consume all of this. So the document was shared, is on the drive. It doesn't seem to have page numbers on it, so that could make things a little challenging, but I think Alex will try to walk us through all of this. Okay, Mr. Mitchell, is there anything you'd like to say before we jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see not only the school committee, but members of the town council. Thank you all for attending this evening, and I know that there are others too that are present, and we do appreciate that. When you see the presentation, you'll see that a tremendous amount of work was done to plan and prepare this, and certainly Alex spent a lot of time on this. Tony DeMana, Mike Chandler, my Cindy Shabbat, a lot of time in preparing the presentation for everyone this evening. And, you know, I just want to stress something that Mrs. Friedman said, and you know, we discussed this yesterday in our central office leadership team meeting. You know, this morning in our leadership team meeting. I mean, this really is equivalent, I think, to like a 3-credit college course. So, you know, I agree with Mrs. Friedman. This is, for those of us that have been a part of this process, it is complex. And, you know, Alex has been doing this for the school budget for, you know, 12 or 14 years. And before that, you know, 30 years or more of municipal experience in the Providence, city of Providence. So he knows this well. And so I agree that there may be some things that you might need a little more time to comprehend. And one thing that we're really, that we do a lot in education is use acronyms. So if there's like an acronym and you aren't sure exactly what it is, slow us down and make sure that you raise your hand and or speak up, and we'll be sure to answer the question as best we can. So I just want to thank everyone that put a lot of time and effort into the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alex.
Thanks, Bob, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. What I'm going to try to do tonight is, you know, give everyone some historical facts of the school department finances over the last several years, along with, you know, some of those historical facts, things that I think impact our budget at a significantly. I also put some topics together that I thought people might have an interest in. For example, how we put the budget together, the budget timeline, how that goes, the state funding formula, which was so dependent on how exactly that works. I'm not sure if everyone knows how that state funding formula works. The school's fund balance, which seems to be a discussion every year during budget topics, during the budget season, the fund balance. And, you know, I'm going to give you like a 20-year history of the fund balance, not a verbal history, but just where the budget's been. You'll see the various surpluses that have been the school department has run over the years, as well as shortfalls. And you'll see what the average fund balance is over that 20-year time period. And then also maybe take a look at, only because I knew Lisa Bouya would be here, some UCOA data that she finds so interesting. So we'll go from there. So the first slide I think that you probably have up there is the budget topics, which Mike putting them up there now. Yeah, there they are. How we'll walk through this tonight. We'll talk about the budget timeline, which I mentioned, the state funding formula, where do our revenues come from, and the two big sources are state aid and town appropriation. Where does our money go? And I've got some backup schedules on some of those major areas that you see there, health, charters, special ed. The Uniform Chart of Accounts, which it's 2018 data, it's the latest that the state has posted. And then our fund balance policy and the history of our fund balance. So next slide, Mike. The budget timeline is, this goes out every year to, along with our budget manual, to all principals and department heads, and has the key dates of how the budget will get put together. So you see that the second line item, the second line there, no later than Friday, January 15th. That was when budgets were due back from all the department heads and principals. Moving down a little bit, which we're in this week, February 1st to the 5th, and that will happen this week. Principals and department heads are making presentations to both Bob and I and other members of senior staff. March 11th, the superintendent's proposed budget will be submitted to the school committee for review. School committee will have it most of March, with a tentative date of March 25th for the school committee to vote to approve the superintendent's 22 budget. And it'll actually be their school committee budget at that point. And then for submission to the town no later than the first Monday in April, which I believe is April 2nd this year, which means that if the school committee needs more time, I guess after that 25th date, they could take it because they could go right up to April 1st as long as the budget was submitted to the town April 2nd. And Bob and I will make ourselves available to the mayor and finance director the first few weeks of April, in case they have questions or anything, want to discuss the budget. And then April 16th, the finance director submits the budget to the mayor. May 10th, the mayor submit it to the town council, which is the second Monday in May. And then the council takes action the first Monday in June and adopts a budget no later than the second Monday of June, and you see those dates. So that's kind of the important dates that we'll be working with this year.
Okay. Alex,
Alex,
I have a question.
sure.
And where in here do we always find ourselves in a situation around non-renewals, and there's, a deadline when we have to do that because we're in flux with the budget and we don't know what our final budget is. Where does that fit in the timeline here?
Well, there are two areas of non-renewal, I guess. There's one for budget for financial purposes, which is at a later time period. And then there's one if you felt that you could, I guess the term we use, if you could do better, if you could find a better person in a position where you wanted to go out. And I believe that Katie, what exactly is that date?
June 1st for budget and March 1st for, we can do.
Yeah, March 1st.
Yeah.
Right. So there are two different time periods there. So the next 20 pages or so are the budget manual that goes out to all the department heads and principals. And in that budget manual, it explains, what we're looking for when they submit their budget. And I would just, those pages are numbered. I would just call people's attention to page 10. I'm not going to read this book to you, but you have it. You can take a look at it. Where it talks about a letter of transmittal. What we like is a letter of transmittal from everyone, which should basically be a brief summary of the budget that they're proposing to us. The major issues that are affecting their school. If there's some significant change they would like, if they were going to be looking for a position, a reading position or something, maybe that would be mentioned in that letter of transmittal. Anything that's kind of a significant change to the school, you would think would be in there. Pages 14 and 15, you'll see the example of you'll see the justification of requested personnel. Those items are what we look for, for someone when they're proposing a new position. Obviously, the job title, the number of positions being requested, number of months that position would be there. Is the position due to existing program or expanded service, and a justification of that position. And behind it on page 15, you see the form that they would use to submit that. So you see they would check off whether it's existing or new or whatever, and justify the position. The next 3 or 4 pages all are very similar to that, but they have to do with the other items in the budget, items like services, supplies, capital. And it's the same thing. If you look at pages 18, 19, and 20, you'll see the same type of forms where they would describe their existing service and what's included in that existing service, an area for them to add a dollar amount for something that might be a new service or program, and then the two of those would add up to the total amount requested. And you see that it provides for them to put in the UCOA code and all the rest of the type of things that we track our expenditures by. And the capital form is similar to that, except that it gives a little bit more. It talks about what might happen if you buy an existing capital. Is it replacing a similar item, and how that similar item might be disposed of? Would there be trade-in value? All those type of things. So it's a pretty lengthy process. The budgets that get submitted, there's a lot of information in them, and our people do a good job at it, I have to say. Any questions on that, or you want me to go into deeper on that? I think you can read that yourself. It's very self-explanatory. It almost is building their budget, kind of a zero-based budgeting concept where each year they have to justify what they have. And then also if they want to add to it, justify whatever addition they have, they're requesting. The next topic on my list of items to cover tonight was the state education funding formula. And I just jotted down just quickly some information you might find interesting on the funding formula. For example, Rhode Island was the last state in the entire country to adopt a funding formula. Before 2010, it was just a free-for-all based on politics and who had legislative votes and all that type of stuff. The formula's goal that came about in 2010 was to distribute state aid equitably and to be child-centered. So it was to get away from this, this kind of non-rational way it was being distributed in the past. When the formula came into place, there were going to be a number of communities, 71% of them, that were going to see an increase in state aid, and 29% were going to lose state aid. What the state did is the communities receiving the increase, they couldn't make you whole in 1 year. What they did is they phased it in over a 7-year period. Towns that were going to lose money, they allowed them to have reductions in their state aid, and they were phased out over a 10-year period. But like I said, 71% of Rhode Island students saw an increase in state aid. The next page, I talk about the 3 components of the formula. The core instruction amount, student success factor, and the state share ratio. So the core amount, that's where the largest amount of aid comes from. What this is basically, it's an average of education expenses, core education expenses in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. They take what those 4 states spend and they take the average, and that becomes the core amount in Rhode Island. In 2010, that amount was $8,295 when the formula was first enacted. Today, that amount in 20 was $9,871. So there's been increases in that. The second piece of the formula is the student success factor. And what this did is it provided additional funding to help close achievement gaps as an addition to the core amount. So the amount is calculated by taking your free and reduced student population and multiplying that number by 40% of the core amount. So that method was a practice found in 22 other states when Rhode Island adopted it. So this amount would be calculated by taking your number of free and reduced students and multiplying it by $3,948 in FY20. And that's why we're always so watching to make sure our free and reduced students submit their applications, because those counts go to the state, and that number is used in calculating that extra $4,000 a kid in state education aid. And then the last component.
Alex, hold on one sec.
Sure.
Alex, do you know offhand for this current year what the number is, or approximate number is?
No, I don't, because with the COVID out there this year, what has happened is they've allowed everyone to receive free and reduced lunch, or not free and reduced lunches, but to receive lunch. So it's really been a struggle to get people to enroll because there's no need.
Yeah.
And I've talked with Rod about that. I said, how are you gonna, everyone's receiving it. People aren't, what are we gonna do with this calculation? And they don't know yet. So we'll have to stay tuned. Well, did you have a question?
Alex, can we game the system here and put in 4,638 students because they all got free and reduced?
Mike Chandler already did, Paul. Mike Chandler probably already did.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
Just one quick question, and we've discussed this in our superintendent's meeting regarding that very issue about the fact that we don't really know how many of our students at this particular point in time are eligible for free and reduced lunch, because everybody is getting a free lunch. So there is a proposal by our association to use, the average of the prior 3 years
Right,
before
right.
this year. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense because everybody's in the same boat. So that is one of the things that they're considering under the circumstances. So I just wanted to add, thank you.
Right, right,
And
Paul.
what would be-
Bob, thanks for adding that. That's important.
And do you know offhand what our average would be?
I don't, Alex might have that, but I don't have that off the top of my
Mike, what are the numbers been around the last couple of years? You send that report in?
Yes, so in the free reduced lunch area, we're looking at about 800 and change.
Yeah,
Fluctuates usually by 30 or 40. Right now, for what we have recorded, I believe we're down about 52. So,
Okay, thank you.
But the average would, for the last 3 years, would certainly help us.
yeah,
Yes.
yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
I was just speaking of what we have right now. Once they bring those numbers into it, it'll be different.
Thank you.
and then I'll go on. The third and final piece of the state formula is called the state share ratio. It's basically it's based on the wealth of the community, or the revenue, or the districts or school or towns revenue generating capacity. Factors such as assessed real estate and median income are the key components. And why I feel Cumberland saw a reduction in state aid last year was because the town did a revaluation. The town got wealthier as property values increased, which means the town had the capacity to raise more revenue on its own with that increased wealth. And what the state does, they're not gonna give you state aid to substitute for you increasing revenue that they feel you should increase on your own.
A question.
That's the third piece of that. So those are the three components.
Okay. Mrs. Feather has a question.
Yeah, and again, relating to COVID, this year, it seems like house values exploded everywhere. Is that going to be, are other towns doing assessments, or are they on the same schedule?
I didn't get the question, Carrie. Could you say it again?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether or not our funding would be impacted by that this year. We're not doing a revaluation this year. However, other towns may be, and COVID has caused a lot of prices to go up. Would that bring more to our community, or would that just even out everybody else?
No. That piece of the formula only affects that individual town. But we have seen that when towns have gone through the reval process, they seem to have a drop in state aid the following year or so.
All right, thank you.
And then just the last page, I just give you some notes on what the formula was designed to fund. It's basically that basic education program or core instruction. And so the formula funds teachers, teacher aides, guidance, media specialists, school administrators, district administration, administrative support, textbooks and equipment, instructional classroom and school supplies, pupil teacher programs and supports, and some benefits. And then some examples of what it's not designed to fund are retiree benefits. Like there are some communities in the state that give health care to retirees and that sort of thing. Well, it's not designed to fund that type of benefit, or debt service, transportation, and capital projects.
Alex, I'm sorry, it's Carrie Smith. Could I ask a quick question before you go on?
Sure.
Under the core cost, it's saying here that this is not inclusive of transportation. However, under the core costs, we have a 20% increase, 26% increase, if I heard correctly lately, on the state charged busing. So is that part of the transportation inclusive with the core cost?
No, that's transportation. That's theoretically designed to not be funded as core instruction.
Okay, so even though the program or the cost is a state run,
Right.
It's up to us to negotiate then still, and so therefore it's not included.
Right, non-core.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next slides, a little bit more history here with these slides. you see our budgeted revenues for 21. You see to the right, the town appropriations, state aid, Medicaid, miscellaneous, town non-maintenance of effort. I'll explain what that is. And then use of fund balance, basically a lot of that from COVID savings of last year. But a total budget of 74,548,000. These are in millions, just for sheer size of the spreadsheet here. And you see that basically the town appropriation makes up 62% of our revenues. State aid is another 28%. So that's 90% of our revenues. The rest coming from items like Medicaid, miscellaneous, which is things like, co-shares on health plans, rentals, tuitions that people pay to come to Cumberland, whether it be preschool or now the CTE type tuitions. The town non-maintenance of effort, the $2.2 million this year. A lot of that is we included 2 leases in our budget, one for $518,000 for data processing and another for $832,000, which is basically paying for some data processing, but the lion's share of that is going to that high school security project, which is about a $700,000 project. Then we put in about $600,000 from COVID savings last year, and also the town, when we moved to the new healthcare plan, was going to require a significant increase in our appropriation to healthcare. And the town has put in the budget $400,000 as a cushion if we need it. Now, if the school department would run a surplus without that $400,000, then we wouldn't take it from the town. But if we were to run a deficit and need that money, the town has guaranteed up to $400,000 to help offset that large increase we had in our healthcare appropriation. So it's worth noting, if you look down the bottom, over 6% of the budgeted revenues in this year's budget are made up of one-time solutions, that town maintenance of effort and fund balance and COVID savings. And that will be a significant number to try to make up next year when we put the 22 budget together.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Mitchell.
just for everyone's information, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Medicaid, that 4.3% amount, we actually have a person who works in our special ed office that actually tracks those special education services that can be reimbursed. So, 4.3%, which includes some other things like tuitions, but, that's a pretty significant amount. But I don't know that folks know that we actually have a person whose one of their most significant responsibilities is to actually code all of those special ed services that can be reimbursed. Is that accurate, Alex?
Yeah, that Medicaid number is $500,000 in the budget. And we have a vendor, CompuClaim, who works with the lady in the special ed department to chase down those various claims for, various,
Reimbursable special ed costs.
Yeah, whether it be speech therapists, various therapists, those type of things. And then the miscellaneous, the big number in there, $1.6 million of that is the co-pays that people pay towards their healthcare plan. And then there's a number in there this year of $600,000 for tuitions, the CT tuitions that we hope to collect and are collecting, and then of course the $500,000 of Medicaid. The next sheet just gives you a little bit of history on what the town appropriation has been over the years. So I started with 2008, and you see I wasn't off to a very good start when I got here. The increases were were kind of small, 71,373. One year when the state had a significant budget problem, they actually cut state aid to cities and towns, cut all the state aid, and they allowed cities and towns to make a reduction, which has never happened in my knowledge, and being involved in municipal finance. They actually allowed them to reduce the maintenance of effort number. So you could reduce it anywhere from 1 to 5%. Cumberland reduced it just 1, and then they gave it back to us the next year. But theoretically, you went there a couple of years with no increase at all in town appropriation. Then as the charter really took hold in Cumberland, the town did ratchet up its contribution. It almost had to, as the charter school increases was $600,000-$700,000 a year in those years where they were adding 2 classrooms a year, you know. And as we saw some significant growth there. And then 2020 and 21, we've slowed down to basically 1% a year. And as we've heard Mayor Mutter talk about, the town has some concerns about, they had some concern about a shrinking fund balance. I guess there had been some one-time solutions used in their budget in the last several years in order probably not to raise taxes, because no elected official wants to raise taxes. And then that was the 20 year. And then in 2021, they still had, you know, some fund balance concerns, but I think in 21, it was more of a concern of how COVID might be affecting its residents, you know, people, whether there was a high level of unemployment and that sort of thing. So hopefully 22 will be a better year from the town, but the 1% the last couple of years is, has hurt the maintenance of effort number. Now in 21, I do want to say the town did, the mayor and the council, find ways to help us with those one-time solutions, the lease that they're doing, the healthcare cushion I just spoke of. So there was an influx, there was the ability to generate close to 4%, but it's not maintenance of effort. That 1.39%, that 632 is just the maintenance of effort number. So you see the total increase of just over $10 million in the 13-year period. And it's an average of $769,000 a year, which, you know, that's what it is. The next page, state aid. You see state aid as the funding formula was phased in over that 6-7 year period that I talked about. You see in the middle of the page some significant increases in state aid, percentage increases anywhere from 13 to 8 and 6, 7%. But in 2020 and 21, well, 2020 we had a 4.5% increase, but the 2021, and I believe, because of that third component of the state aid formula, we actually had a 4.3% reduction. That coupled with the, with the maintenance of effort reductions the last couple of years has kind of forced us to use that significant one-timers this year of leases, et cetera, that we talked about. The next page just shows you the two together. So one sheet, you can see what town and state increases to the town have been from 2011 forward. Go to the next slide, Mark, appropriations. Here's the appropriations. You see the same $74,548,000. You see salaries, fringes, et cetera, in the right-hand side. And you see the percentages of what they make up of the budget. So for example, salaries, 54%, fringes, 24%, and you can read them. Tuition, 7.7%, transportation, 4.7%, et cetera, et cetera. So if you take basically our salaries, fringes, tuitions, special ed tuitions and charter school tuitions, which we have very little control over, and transportation, they represent over 90% of the budget, and all items like supplies and all services and capital items and dues and debt service, et cetera, under 10% of the budget. So there isn't a lot of non-discretionary items in the school department. For some, when people say $74 million, you should be able to cut $1 million. Well, that's really hard because of that 74 million, like 60 something million of it is fixed,
Alex, can I just jump in? That just very quickly, everybody, and I think just about everybody, on this, in this meeting knows this, but the money that we're paying in tuitions, almost 4 million of it is for Blackstone Valley Prep. The number of tuitions that we have been paying for special ed students, out of district special ed, has decreased significantly because we've developed programs in-house to keep our students in Cumberland. Good for the students and a significant savings for the district. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that one of our biggest challenges is, paying a tuition bill to Blackstone Valley Prep for almost $4 million, and they get their money regardless of our circumstances. We're laying people off, but they still get whatever tuition is required for the students that attend. Thank you, Alex.
And then the chart below that is just it's a bar chart, another way of showing the various costs, and you see the total numbers of the next chart down, Mike.
Do you have a question?
Oh, sure.
Mrs. Rogalski, did you raise your hand?
Sorry, yeah, I did. I don't want to just jump in. Alex, is there going to be an explanation later in this of the breakdown of charter schools? Because that's something being new, I don't understand.
I've got a sheet on charter schools, just gives you a little bit of facts. So we can talk about charter schools in 2 or 3 pages here.
Thank you.
And then this is a bar chart that actually Cindy Shabbat worked on and was putting together. And so I said, yeah, include it in. It's just another way of showing the various appropriations. So you see the total of $74,548,000, and you see the dollar amounts that represent salaries, fringes, services, et cetera, down the bottom. The next sheet this is one of our biggest expenditures, healthcare claims. So you see healthcare claims going from 2008, we were spending $6 million a year. And in 2020, $6,955,000 a year. So basically over those 12 years, you saw a 14.8% increase, or an average of 1.2% a year, which I think anyone back in 2008 would have signed a contract to have only a 1.2% increase a year in healthcare costs. And that came about with a couple of things. One, the school district implemented a Plan Group 65, which took a lot of retirees off, as everyone knows, was self-insured. They took them off our healthcare plan and they put them in kind of this premium arrangement where they pay, with a middleman, they pay us and we pay Blue Cross, but the claims, 80% of them go to Medicare and 20% go to Blue Cross and kind of a premium arrangement. So that plan, is like $700 and something a month compared to our healthcare plan, which was much more expensive. So it was tough to get people to move to that plan because of everyone, their healthcare is like apple pie and, the Chevy and apple pie, I guess, but we met with, or I met and Janine Rue in my office, we met with every retiree and I told them, listen, go to this plan. If you don't like it for any reason, I'll take you back into our plan. Not one person ever came back. They all saved money, and we got probably anywhere from $1.4 million to $1.8 million of claims off our budget. And you can kind of see how the budget dropped down in those middle years into the 4s and has come back up because our increases really haven't been 1.2%. They average that 1.2% because of getting retirees off the plan. Another thing that helped get those retirees off the plan was at the time, they've both been mayors. One's Mayor of Cumberland now, one was Mayor of Cumberland in the past. They, and working with us, they wanted us to create a working rate just for retirees, which was a much higher rate because they were the major drivers of healthcare. Theoretically, someone 70 has more healthcare issues than someone 30. And so when developing that rate and moving to move retirees to that higher rate, the ones who hadn't come to the Plan Group 65, if eligible, came to it. And then those who weren't eligible, many of them went to the state plan, which was administered by, not by Blue Cross, but what's the, I'm drawing a blank on who the other major healthcare provider is, but they managed the state plan at the time, and people were afraid of leaving Blue Cross. But when faced with a significant rate increase, they either went to that plan or went to our plan group 65, and we basically got out of the retiree healthcare business. Next slide, unless there's any questions on healthcare.
Can we get back into the retiree healthcare business?
We're gonna in a year or so here, probably when you go, we'll get right back in. Here's where I put a little sheet together for charter schools, and I'll read it.
Alex,
I think we have a question.
I apologize. It's Carrie Smith again. The healthcare costs, are they any of that in with the staffing costs, or is that part of the fringes?
I didn't hear you, Carrie. Could you repeat it again?
Oh, I'm sorry. The healthcare costs, is that part in the budget under the fringes or under the salaries?
It's under fringes. It's on the last page of the expenditures. And I should note, if you go to compare some of the charts, that is only claims. That has nothing to do with buybacks and admin and stop loss insurance, all those type of stuff. Those numbers were just claims.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, they're on the last page of the budget. Charter schools, and I don't know if this will answer what Amy was asking a second ago. Charter tuitions in Cumberland have grown from 125,000 in 2008 to approximately the 3.8 million that Bob mentioned just a couple of moments ago in 20. In that time period, charter school students have received 40% of all the town allocated dollars for schools. Of the 9.4 million allocated in this time period, the charter schools got 3.8 million of it. The 3.8 million has been allocated to, back in 2008, probably about 20 students that were at charter schools, to the current number of 475 students today, while 5.6 million was provided to the 4,600 students at the traditional public school. 40% of the increased town appropriation for schools went to a population that represented 11% of the town of Cumberland's population, school population. And that number's improved. You go back a couple of years, because the charter schools have leveled off now. They're not filling 2 grades a year. I think between that and also the fact that Cumberland has done better in testing and scores and that type of stuff to move into the top tier of schools in the state, I think more kids are staying in Cumberland than in the past. That number, just going back to 2007, they had received 52% as of 17, between 2008 and 2017, of all new money that the town gave us. So the average over the last 12 years has been 783,000. The charter schools received 317 compared to 466 for the Cumberland School Department. So 317 for 400 and something kids and 466,000 for 4,000 something kids. And so in my calculation, it was about $101 for a public school student compared to $667 for a charter school student. And the charter school tuitions represent about 5.3% of our budget. And we talk about it all the time. If we didn't have that $4 million payment, where the school district could be.
I just want to, this probably isn't for Alex, so it's probably for another meeting, but I just want to, just because the idea just came to me and I want to say it. Is there any, I'm trying to think of a way that we could, have even a marketing campaign to try to get students back, like come back to Cumberland or something like that. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there and for future discussion.
Well, a lot of students have been coming back to Cumberland, and Bob, you might want to add it to this because I know you followed this closely.
Yeah, we're finding that, and certainly I know that we've actually gathered some data on this over the last couple of years, and we can have Tony's assistant, Lori Carr, provide that information. But the trend has been when BVP students from Cumberland, approach the middle school years or higher, there's a tendency for them to come back. So as Alex said, the number of students attending the charter school has definitely leveled off, and it may have even dropped a little. So the good news is, I think because, as Alex mentioned, the school department has been, the students have been performing well on the state assessment. There's less likelihood that families are considering the charter school. So yeah, I know that we had some data on that, and certainly we can pull that together if the school committee is interested.
Thanks, Tom.
And a good reason, a good part of why when we did this bond issue, this town bond referendum, we put so much of the money into the elementary schools. We want to, curb appeal is very, very important. If you're going to send your child to a school, you want to know that it's modern, it's clean, it looks good. And that's where we lose kids. If we could keep them from going to the elementary schools, and I feel that's the only really way we're going to shut off the faucet to the charter schools. Our elementary schools have to perform better and look better. And I think they will when we're done with this bond project.
Yeah, and they are top 5 performing elementary and middle schools in the state right now. So we're doing well and getting better.
Now, if we can only get a coat of paint in there, we'll be all set.
Alex, forgive my ignorance here. How is the formula for how much money we give to the charter schools determined? Who determines that? And is there any chance of changing that? Because that just seems ridiculous.
Good luck.
Who said good luck?
If I may, I think, over the last couple of years, there has been a movement to, rethink the way that charter school tuitions are calculated. I have testified, at both the House Finance Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, and we have an ally in Senator Pearson and others. And so there is definitely, I think, some consideration to recalculating the formula that is used, because I think any reasonable person would have to acknowledge that the way the charters are funded from the sending districts is really not fair. So, we do, I know that, we have some people working both publicly and behind the scenes to try and do something about this. $3.8 million, that's a lot of money. So hopefully there'll be some change in how that calculation is done in the near future.
Yeah, and just to answer, I think it was Amy, that number's it goes up a couple $100 a year. It's all tied into core and the rest of that type of stuff, but we pay about $8,200 a kid that goes to the charter schools. So if you take that 475 kids and divide it into 3.8, you'll get that $8,000 something a kid.
And Cumberland is one of the hardest hit communities with charter schools.
Yes.
And so getting the legislation to change it has been really challenging, because other communities in the state maybe have, this is an exaggeration, but like onesie twosies that go to charter schools. And because BVP is in Cumberland, we have a significant number that go. So trying to get the state to change it for everyone has been challenging, because we are the hardest hit, and it's an ongoing struggle.
I still think a lot of people go to the charter school because they operate longer into the day, and I think it solves a lot of daycare issues for working families. So if we could
Agreed.
somehow solve that issue, with, where even if it meant we paid the bill for daycare for kids that came here. I mean, if it would reduce that $3.8 million, it may be well worth it.
That's a really good idea.
Special education budgeted tuitions, the next slide. We talked a little bit about this earlier and how one of the things we've tried to do is build capacity programs in the district. And you can see that over the years, that number has come down and to where it's $1,250,000 in 2021. Last time I looked, I believe we have about 17 students that are out of district right now, which is, considering they're about 20% of the population is pretty good. And you can see that building capacity and adding programs and stuff has saved significant dollars. And like Bob mentioned, it's a whole lot. It's certainly more beneficial for the student to be in their own local school district than being sent out to a placement, I think.
Yeah, and Alex, are the actuals close to the budgeted amount?
Yes. Matter of fact, last year, the $1,350,000, we spent less than that. Yeah, very
Alex,
close to the budgeted amounts.
Alex, can I ask a question?
Sure, Dennis.
Does this tuition right here also include transportation, which I believe we're required to provide for them, correct?
No, that is just tuitions and out of placement. The statewide transportation's in the transportation budget, and that number between the high school, what's it? Hope, what's it? Mount St. Charles, special ed, and some of the transportation we're required for. That number's over $1 million a year, with special ed probably being about 600,000 of that.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide. There was a chart, I guess, before that. I don't know if it's there anymore. Do we have a chart? No. Oh, there it is. It was after it, but this is basically our employee count today. We'll go back up to that slide that we just went by. This is our employee profile. You can see there are 31 non-union employees in the district, representing just over 5%. About 130 ICSI employees, and as you would expect in a school department, the lion's share of employees would be teachers. In the CTA union, which would also be the psychologist, speech, et cetera, those type of positions, 432. The chart, the sheet above it, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
This is our staffing and student counts over the year. So you see our staffing back in 2012 was 70 people less than it is today. So it's been a 13% increase in staffing. And I give you some examples of things that it's funded. For example, full day K came into the mix during that time period. Reading and math interventionists that the school committee fought to get into the budget to work with tier 3 students that were struggling. Continuation of interventionists and the deans, which were new positions at the high school. Special ed supports which have been going on for the last 5 or 6 years at the capacity we've been building in programs and stuff to bring those out of district costs down. And then most recently, adding the tier 2 supports. These are some of the highlights of things that we've added. Those tier 2 supports that to work with students who are very, very close to being proficient, but not quite there, with the goal of hoping to get them over the line to where they're proficient and not just falling below it. So these programs have all been part of what I would think the educators, Bob and Tony, would say have been a big part of, Cumberland's rise in testing and where it stands in the state as far as those type of measures. But and then the far column, you see the student count. We're right about where we were in 2012. So though the charter schools have come in, we've managed to hold our own and keep most of our students home. And obviously that's so important because we've seen how each one of those students is worth just about $10,000 and up to about $14,000 if they're free and reduced. Go ahead, Mike. This next sheet
Oh,
And
sorry.
someone,
Sorry, it's Amy Rogalski again. Quick question. Do we know how many students left the district this year due to COVID and not having full-time school to go to private or other situations?
yeah, we do. I don't have that number right off the top of my head. I don't know if Tony or Bob do.
I don't have it off the top of my head. Tony, do you know?
So we typically have about 70. The only number I have is the homeschool kids, which is
Yeah.
we typically have about 70. It's up to about 140, 142, somewhere around there. It doubled.
Yeah, it's doubled. Yeah.
So that will very much hurt the state aid number next year.
Mhm.
The budget drivers I put up there, basically from 2008 to 2019, an 11-year average there, you can see what the increases have been in various, what I call drivers: salaries, pensions, utilities, medical, special ed, tuitions, charters, and then all other, I tried to break down the bigger ones. And so, for example, you see this in this 11-year period, salaries have averaged a 2.98% growth a year, which that includes 70 additional positions, though, included in that. It includes all steps as well as just union raises. So the district has not been, I would say, reckless in any way with in funding of salaries in the district. You see something like utilities. We've done a lot of work in lighting projects, heating, energy management systems in 7 of our schools that turn things off when they would run 24 hours a day now, and they turn things off weekends, bring temperatures down on the weekend, all those type of things. You actually see we spend less in utilities now than we did in 2008. Special ed, we talked about. You see that 4% reduction, an average a year from the 2.3 to $1.3 million. Charters, you can see the meteoric rise from 125 to 3.9, or 276% increase. And an average over the time, a 2.32% increase in the school budget. But when you take out, and the little note down the bottom, if you take that budget growth from 51 million to 69 million in the totals, $18 million, if you take out pensions, which we have very little control over the state pension system. We don't obviously pick their money managers and all those type of things that go in calculating pension costs. And you take out the charters, which we have no control over, the net increase has been about $12 million over this time period, or just over $1.1 million a year, which includes, raises, steps, all fringes, all other fringes at least. Well, all fringes. Services, supplies, capital items, all the investment the district over the last years has made in capital items in the area of technology. So $1.1 million a year average increase. The next couple of sheets are the UCOA data, and the latest data I have. So you see, I've compared Cumberland to the suburban average because we are a suburban community.
Hey, Alex,
Go ahead.
can you describe or define what UCOA is?
Oh, yeah, that's the uniform chart of accounts that all school districts use. So if you were to code a business manager's position in East Greenwich, it would be the same code in Cumberland. So it's so that this data is, when posted, is uniformly understood by anyone who wants to look at it, and they can make comparisons, statewide, district to district. So what I've done, and we'll focus on 19 since it's the most recent data. I put in the Cumberland actuals, and next to it I put in the suburban state averages, which I put in the state suburban because we're a suburban. I didn't include in that calculation, which we are so much different than a place like a Pawtucket or a Providence or that type of stuff, which are urban districts. So you see in the area of face-to-face teaching, and there are 5 major categories, Cumberland is 54.93%. The statewide average is 54.81%. So we're a little bit ahead of the state. Where we lack in that category is in the instructional materials, where we spent 0.76% against a state average of 1.1. but our instructional teachers are at 48.7 compared to 47.9. So, and a lot has to do with that number of teachers, teacher contracts, what you're paying, what Cumberland pays a teacher compared to what, another suburban community might, but all very close, but we lack in the area of the instructional materials. But overall, 54.93, 54.81. The next area, pupil and teacher support, and I put a description of what each of these things, covers. So, for example, going back to instructional teachers, and covers classroom teachers, their salaries and their benefits. And so you can read those. So under the pupil and teacher support, the area where we really lack, and no surprise, we don't have any librarians at the middle school. We don't have a library program at the middle school. So you see where state average is 1.11% of their budget spent on library. Cumberland's under 0.5%. We don't put much resources at all into the media specialist positions. Even at the elementary school, our positions are 0.5s. Also, student support services, which we talk about all the time, social workers, psychologists, and how we've tried to do more in the area of mental health, but we still over 1% lower than the rest of the state average in that area. Psychologists, social workers, speech, et cetera, et cetera. So you see the difference, 13.5% spent in Cumberland compared to over 15% in the other suburban districts. Operations, we're a little bit above, but the big number is food service, and I can't figure out why Cumberland is at 4% compared to 1.9 to the other suburban communities, unless Cumberland has just more free and reduced, significantly more free and reduced kids than these other places. And Cumberland's kind of a bigger suburban district, so that could be it. The suburban districts that are in there are like, North Smithfield, very, districts much smaller than ours. But that's kind of a number that's, the number is what it is. It really doesn't affect anything, because it's a separate enterprise account that only is spent on food services. It doesn't necessarily benefit us that we're spending more money there. It doesn't benefit anything educationally other than we run a good program there. And then the other number, which I think has building upkeep and utilities. I think a lot of this is the work we've done in utilities and some of the other areas. You see we're over 1% lower in what we spend in that building upkeep and utilities than the state suburban averages. Other commitments. The big thing in there is the pass-through, that includes all special ed, charter, and vocational tuitions. And you see Cumberland is just almost 1.5% higher than the average of the state, and that's because of the charter school located in Cumberland. And then leadership would pretty much, the same as other districts. The sheet behind that, what I did is I gave you Cumberland's numbers for 18 and 19, and I went in and dropped in some numbers from other districts that are like Coventry. I mean, they're like within, I think, a student of being the same size as we are. It's like amazing how similar they are to us. And then Lincoln and East Greenwich, two of the better districts that you would expect, wealthier districts that spend money. You can see how we compare to those type of districts. And I gave you both 18 and 19 numbers there. So I don't know if there's any questions on UCOA, but it gives you something to kind of get an idea of what Cumberland is doing compared to other communities in the state in these different broad categories. Those first couple of categories are those real core amounts, that face-to-face teaching and pupil and teacher support. That's what, as school committee members, I mean, not that you're not interested in, that we spend efficiently and stuff in the other areas, but educationally, that's where your sweet spot would be, those two top categories.
May I just add something very quickly? One of the things that Alex and I talk frequently about is the amount of time and effort that it requires to provide all of this data, and you're just seeing one small piece of it. So his staff in the business office spends a tremendous amount of time providing information into all of the UCOA codes. Alex, how many are there in total?
Our general ledger went from, when I got here, it was like 20 pages. It's now almost 200 pages because of all the UCOA codes. And the state's really gone a little bit overboard. I think the original intent was, if Lincoln is spending less money than Cumberland in math, but their math scores are a lot better, you might want to see what is Lincoln doing that Cumberland isn't, at less money, that type of comparison. They've gone down to like, if I buy a gallon of paint, it has to be at the school location. If a window breaks, it has to be that they code it, whether it's vandalism or whether it was an accident. I mean, they've created so many codes. It's really, really. We have a person almost spends 70% of their time just doing nothing but UCOA or that type of stuff. It's really been a cost that's been put on a lot of these districts, especially some of the bigger districts. But instead of just, like I said, charging a can of paint to facilities, what did we measure in educationally if we painted a hallway at Ashton compared to last year we painted the hallway at Community, But they've added all these additional codes, and it takes a lot of time.
There is some question, and it has been discussed in our superintendent meetings, if around the time and effort it takes to provide this information. And as Alex said, I'm not so sure that the data is being used as, whoever created this, was hoping that it would. So a lot of time and effort, as you can see, to provide this data into the appropriate category. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll let you guys look at those, and any follow-up questions, we'll be happy to get you information or answer questions about. That's just a graph we did on that. It shows the different percentages. The last item I'll cover, I said I try to keep this 1 hour. I'm just a little bit over that, so we're doing pretty good here, is fund balance. And like I said, this comes up for discussion every single year when the budget gets put together. Should school department have a fund balance? How much can we use to balance the budget? So the first 2 pages there are the Cumberland School Department's fund balance policy, which I felt we should have a fund balance policy so that we, all good cities and towns and school departments, any of them that are, have people that are, I think professional finance directors and stuff have fund balance policies. So I'm not going to read it to you, but I will point out on the second page, this is the key piece down towards the bottom where it says, you getting that? Second page. Oh.
Which part of it?
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yep. In addition, it starts with the in addition. So in addition, the school department shall maintain an unassigned fund balance. And by unassigned, that means those dollars are free and clear. They're not reserved for any specific purpose. So when I show you the fund balance, where our fund balance was as of 2019, I'll explain a little bit of which ones are assigned and which ones aren't. But on the unassigned portion of the fund balance should be not less than 2% or not greater than 4% of the total general fund audited actual expenditures of the previous fiscal year in order to accommodate immediate cash flow needs for unanticipated expenditures and or emergencies. So, and then if our fund balance is over 4%, we set it up so anything above 4% automatically goes to capital items in the school budget, which is really a big benefit, I feel, for the town, because anything that we have for capital purposes and can fix ourselves is a dollar the town doesn't have to raise to fix a building for us. So anything above 4%, once we get above 4%, it automatically goes into a capital assigned fund balance. And then anytime we would fall under 4%, we would take action that we would in the event that the unassigned fund balance falls below 2%, the school committee, with the assistance of the business manager, as soon as practical, at the end of the fiscal year, create a plan to restore the fund balance. And so basically, our plan would be that we would budget a certain amount each year to restore that fund balance. So if it fell $400,000 below fund balance in upcoming budgets, we would budget a portion that would be left unspent, that would get that fund, theoretically would be there at the end of the operations of the school year, and would go back into fund balance to get it back to that minimum 2%. The next sheet is what the history of fund balance has been in Cumberland. So you see in 1999, the school department had a $716,000 fund balance, almost $717,000. And you can see the changes over the years. You know, that far right column is the surplus or deficit that the district ran during those years. And so we are now in 2019, 20 isn't yet released, sit with a $3,766,000 fund balance, which from the 716 to the 3,000,007, that $3 million increase over 20 years has been an average increase of $152,000 a year. There have been some years where there's been significant fund balance surpluses. Then there are years like 2017 where there's been not so much a deficit, but a planned deficit that the school department had planned to use a significant amount of its fund balance to balance that year's budget. So you see how the categories line up as of 2019, the first one being at the bottom of the page, healthcare, $614,000. $450 of that we established years ago as a reserve against healthcare claims, being self-insured, not knowing when we might see some significant healthcare claims. We put some money aside to help offset claims in a year that we had a particularly bad year. And one of the reasons it allowed us over the years to to underfund what the working rate was calculating for claims, because to go to the number that would have been required would have been reductions in programs. And so knowing we had this 450 reserve, we were able to take a little bit of gamble on that account over the years. Now in this year's budget, of that 450, we're using 300,000 to balance the budget, because going to the new WB community, which is kind of a hybrid premium self-insured plan, we pay them a set dollar amount, a working rate each month. There's no, well, we won't pay it and we'll hope to run a surplus somewhere else, or we'll fall back on this. So we pay that, we're paying that number now. And so it required us to take our healthcare number up this year by well over $1 million. So we use 300,000 of our own, and that's where I mentioned earlier the $400,000 cushion that the mayor put in our budget to help us, if we need it this year, run a deficit. It would help offset our shortfall. Also included in that number's a dollar amount that we keep on reserve at Blue Cross to pay weekly claims. It's an asset, it's ours, but it's designated to pay weekly healthcare claims, and we really can't touch that. Capital is a result of some years where we hit that 4% number and money went into the capital account. There's 55,000 sitting in there. The education supplies of 125,000, that's paying for the second year of a $250,000 program. That was 125 in last year's budget as well. In this year's budget as well. This was the first year because we're back in 19. This was the K-2 Wonders Reading Program that we paid for over 2 years. And so that is designated to pay for that reading program. There'll be more money that'll have to go in there. And I'm sure, I don't know how far Mr. Dabana's got with discussing this with school committee members about certain curriculums that the state is going to be requiring us to purchase over the next 3 years, probably in somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000 of of curriculum purchases we'll make. And if we are able to run surpluses, we'll designate some of that money in there so that it helps. We don't have to budget it in future budgets. The designated for 2019 budget, that was the amount that was included in the 19 budget for use of fund balance. It was $450,000. And the $2,522,000 was the unassigned or undesignated amount. And that amount represented basically 3.62% of our budgeted expenditures for 19, with the policy being between 2 and 4%. So that's a little bit of the history of where the fund balance is, what it's averaged over the years, what it's made up of 19. I will update this as soon as the order comes out for 20. And the designated amount now for 20, the fund balance is going to explode because we had $2 million of savings last year. It'll be a number similar to $6 million bucks, but that designated for 2020 budget, which has to be used for that 20 budget. The auditors require you designate that money. It's not unassigned and can be used to spend on anything. Will be over $2 million for designated for the 2020 budget. So, the unassigned will remain a very similar number, about $2.7 million. And that's all I really have on fund balance. I also included a sheet, and the state has gotten wise. They make you hunt and peck to see where you are against other communities. This used to be high to low. We used to see Block Island or someone at the top at 100,000 a kid, down to Woonsocket, Cumberland, and the others. Now they put it alphabetical order. So you see Cumberland there at 15,456 in the yellow far column. And I went down it quickly, and I believe Woonsocket is still the only district that is below us at 15,372. It's kind of, where, not to discredit Woonsocket or whatever, but when you compare Cumberland and Woonsocket, it seems like Cumberland has for similar dollars that were being spent on children is getting a lot better bang for its dollar than Woonsocket. Just my observation, maybe not yours, but I think we're getting a good bang for our dollar. And that's all I have. And I don't know if we want to go back and talk about any slides, or let people digest this, or come up with other topics they might have an interest in that I don't mind coming back and discussing, or whatever the pleasure is. I find usually after an hour or so, people kind of like, when's this going to end type of thing.
Alex, I think you did a really good job of walking us through that. I think I might have learned more tonight in 1 hour than I have in a couple of years. You did a really great job of breaking that down.
I'm glad you found it helpful. And, any questions or anything that people have, like I said, I know Kerry and I met for a couple of hours once. I'm happy to meet with anyone, including members who've been on the committee in the past. The questions come up and that type of stuff.
Yeah. Mrs. Rogalski?
I have to say I wasn't really looking forward to this because budgets are not my thing, but I actually found this quite fascinating. And I really enjoyed it. I think you did a fantastic, you made me understand it, which is a miracle. So just kind of looking back as we head into budget season, am I correct in that we're going to be losing roughly, I did the math, 4.6 million next year? There's going to be a difference of that because those are those one-time solutions. And then we're also probably getting a reduction in state aid because we have fewer students. Yeah,
what I've done is, and and I don't know if I've sent it to the whole committee. I know I shared it with Karen and Paul, as the chair of finance and the chair of the school committee. I'm happy to send it out tomorrow. What I've done is rolled up 22, 23, 24, and we'll go through it next Monday, and I'm happy to go through it. I'll send it out. I'm happy to go through it with anyone individually. There's a back page that lists all the type of assumptions I've made on all the type of revenues and on salaries and fringes, etc. And, I'll reveal those next week, and I'm happy to, have discussion. Like, what do you mean you're saying 5% healthcare? That's crazy. Yeah, that's too high. Bring it, and we'll debate why I use 5%. I'll tell you why I use 5%. It'll be because I talked to the consultant who told me that the number's probably going to be 4.8 to 5%. But anyhow, we'll go through that next Monday. I show a gap. Now, this is without any increase in town appropriation, and I level fund state aid, which may be extremely hopeful, right, based on what we heard from Tony today about the number of homeschool children. But I've level funded state aid and I've level funded town appropriation. Now, I will seriously doubt we'll go 3 years without any increase in town appropriation. So those numbers are exaggerated, obviously. They show a $4.8 million, 4.8, something like that in next year, and it grows up until about just under $9 million in the third year out. But remember, if you get $1.8 million from the town next year, that $1.8 million rolls for 3 years. It's really getting, that $1.8 million, it's like a pay raise. It doesn't go away. Like when you give a 2% salary increase, it's not just for that year, it's forever in the budget. And so wouldn't the state aid be. So when depending on what we're able to get from the town and state aid, and what happens with what we get from the town and what happens with state aid is going to determine a lot of what happens in Cumberland. That's why, and I said it before, and I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks this. I know Bob, I think, thinks it too. Also, I think we really have to do such a bang-up job with our elementary schools that we start to turn the faucet off on the charters, and as kids, not that kids will necessarily leave the charters now, but as kids say, you know what, Cumberland, I want to be in Cumberland. Cumberland, look at the school, how brand new it is. Look at the scores, look at everything else. And that's one of the few ways we can help our budget. We don't have much ability to do much on the revenue side. It's either town appropriation, the state aid, there's a formula that goes with it, and that formula would increase if we're able to keep kids in Cumberland. So not only would you be reducing charter school tuitions, you'd be increasing your state aid. So that's really been Bob and our focus with this bond issue.
Yes, Alex, just one question. If students, and I think if you, just maybe to clarify, if students start in the charter school and that percentage is taken away from us and goes from state aid, them being in the charter, not with us, and that comes back state allocate, is that correct?
That hurts. Not only does it hurts our state aid, right? Because they get the state aid, but we also pay a tuition. It's a double hit. We lose state aid, and we pay an $8,200 and something tuition for each of those kids.
Do we have any recourse to go back to them and try to get those fundings, or a law that just says it is what it is as of September 1st and that's it?
I know this has been something that since the charter schools came around, that school committee's members, Paul, Ray Salvatore, others have wrestled with. Steve Adams is on the call. I see his name. We've wrestled with this issue, and state law isn't on our side here. There has to be changes at the General Assembly, and it's like a lot of things. The charter school people, when there's a hearing, everyone who goes to a charter school shows up. And so the General Assembly sees that passion from that group of people, even though the public schools in population dwarf the charter schools, but the charter school parents don't show up.
Remember, they're also sometimes incentivized to show up and asked to show up.
Oh yeah, I know.
Our funding from the state, though, so that's set. It's a certain date and it's based upon a certain amount of students. So if we're looking right now, like with the COVID year that we're having, and we've doubled the homeschooling, the state has not readjusted our budget to take that away from us. That's in our.
The year that we're in now, we are going to receive. Remember, there was talk with the state budget. Everyone said, "Oh my God, we don't know what might happen to state aid if the state can't balance their budget, this and that." we've been told that we will get the amount that we were budgeted for in state aid this year. So we're all set for this year. It's next year that could be a big problem. And the problem is, even if the Biden administration would have come up with some type of, money for this, that's been, one of the hang-ups with getting a deal done in the Senate with money coming to cities and cities and states and cities. Even if we were to get that money, what the state of Rhode Island does, they take that money and say, oh, you're getting it, Cumberland, you're getting 636, well, like the ESSA money, you're getting 538,000. Beautiful. We can cut your state aid by 538,000. The district never makes out. The state takes the money and balances its budget. It's just horrific. So we'll see how the state aid plays out, but in those numbers you'll see, and I'll send that out. I'll send that out tomorrow or maybe tonight. You'll see the state aid's I've just leveled it for now because I don't have any facts or figures, but with the caveat knowing that could be a reduction. And I've left town appropriation alone, which hopefully that will be an increase.
Okay. Any other questions for Alex at this time from anyone? Any closing comments from Mr. Mitchell or Mr. Prignano?
I enjoy doing this. I like when people take an interest in the budget and know what makes it up and that type of stuff. I think it's good. Oftentimes, people get so focused, and I understand that, school committee, everyone's focused on scores and that type of stuff, but this is the stuff that allows us to do what we want to do,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad when people take an interest.
If just one more thing, Madam Chair, Alex, thank you. You did a great job, and thanks to everyone who contributed. And it really I think is helpful for us to understand as much as possible about how this process works. And it is true that we have another challenge ahead of us with this budget, and we got to figure out how we're going to balance the budget with what we anticipate will be a pretty significant gap that we'll have to overcome in order to balance. And again, I clearly you can sense my frustration about the fact that regardless of how difficult it is for us, and we spend less per pupil than anyone else except for Woonsocket, it's frustrating when we're going to be writing a check for $3.8 million to the charter schools. So we'll do our best as we always do to try and minimize any impact on student achievement, which has been doing exceptionally well. As everyone knows, we're top 5 elementary and middle. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you. Thank you again to everyone who helped put this together for tonight. It was really, really valuable. Okay. Are there any questions? No. The next item on the agenda is public comments. So if anyone from the public would like to make a comment, you can raise your virtual hand or *6 to unmute. Do we see anybody, Mr. Chandler?
Looks like Lisa Bulio would like to speak.
Welcome, Lisa. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Sure thing. Lisa Bolio, 196 Hines Road, and I'm a District 3 Town Council person. Just an ask from Alex. I know you had mentioned, Alex, sharing some of the info that you've been kind of soft drafting here as it relates to potential revenue for next year, revenue shortfalls. It would be good if you could share that with the council as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yep.
I do not see anybody else at this time with their hand up.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending, especially others outside of the school committee. I think it was really good for all of us to hear the same message at the same time. And next item on the agenda is to adjourn the meeting. So I need a motion to
Motion to
adjourn
adjourn?
by Mr. Fiorello,
Second.
second by Mrs. Feather. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. We are adjourned at 7:31 PM.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.
Thank you.